A lot of times in high school, kids are like, why do I have to learn this stuff? I'm never going to use it in real life. And I can definitely see that for some things. I used to say that for some things. But I don't think math is one of those things. I feel like math is one of those things that you're going to use for the rest of your life. Take percentages, for example. Calculating percentages might not seem important now, but it can really help you understand the world around you once you learn how to do it. And they help you to know just how special something is that you happen to be looking at. For example, have you ever seen anyone who is 40% taller than everyone else? That's a pretty cool percentage, isn't it? But we can do better. Yeah. Have you ever seen someone who is 75% tanned? Okay, that's incredible and slightly crazy, but that's only 75%. There is still room to grow as far as percentages go. Have you ever watched somebody who is 90% awesome? Wow, that is amazing. 90%, pretty close to the top, but can we hit 100? Is there anything that we can hit 100% on? Well, glad you asked. Let me show you someone who 100% is sleeping on the couch tonight.
It's bad like a boom, 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 boom. It's bad like a boom, 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 boom. It's bad like a boom, 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 boom.
You see, percentages really do matter, don't they? Absolutely. Percentages can provide you with some pretty useful information if you use them correctly. When we come to today's scripture, we find Jesus teaching, and he's sitting in the temple and he's teaching. Now, before we go any further, I think I should stop a minute just to shed a little bit of a light on the temple itself. So you understand, because I think a lot of times we don't quite understand what the temple was like. And we're speaking here, of course, of the temple that existed during Jesus's life, and that was Herod's temple. Herod took over the temple in 39 BC. Major construction on the temple began in 19 BC, and the finishing touches weren't put on his temple until 63 AD. Sadly, only 7 years later, it was destroyed and then never reconstructed. A part of the temple that still remains is the Wailing Wall. It's also known as the Western Wall, and it is still a location that many Jews will journey to in order to pray. I think a lot of time when we think of the temple back in Jesus' day, Herod's temple, I think we just kind of picture it like a large church, don't you? Because that's the first thing that comes to mind when we say temple. That's not really the case, though, not the case at all. Herod's temple was more of a complex than a single building. You see, his temple was 35 acres total in size. That is the equivalent of 25 football fields. So that's not what you were picturing in your mind, is it? That's big. That is big. When you first entered the temple complex, you found yourself in the court of the Gentiles. This was referred to as the outer court. If you weren't Jewish, this was all the further you were allowed to go in. This court is where Jesus, on 2 different occasions, clears out the money changers who were taking advantage of the people and making sacrifice more about cash than it was actually about God. If you were Jewish, however, you could keep traveling deeper into this complex, and you could travel through this section, through the gate, and you would find yourself now entering into the inner courts. There were 3 inner courts: the court of women, followed by the court of men, and finally the court of priests. The court of women, that was the farthest that Jewish women were allowed to enter. And Jesus was known to teach in all of these courts. But from the multiple stories that we read, it seems that it was pretty common for him to teach within the court of the women. Inside the court of the women were 13 collection boxes for different types of offerings. On the top of these boxes were metallic trumpet-shaped collection openings. Now, a common practice back in that day would be to make sure when you were putting coins in, you would hit the metal trumpet so that it could make a noise. The more noise it made, the bigger the offering. The bigger the offering, the more impressive it was. So you would have wealthy people who would come up and they would pour their offering in, and it would sound like somebody just hit the jackpot on a slot machine. And everyone would look over to see who it was. This is what Matthew 6 is talking about when Jesus says, "Be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others to be seen by them. If you do, you will have no reward from your Father in heaven. So when you give to the needy, do not announce it with trumpets, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and on the streets, to be honored by others." Yeah, it's pretty cool, isn't it? So Jesus is in the court of women, and he's teaching. His disciples are there, and they're listening, and they're sitting across from these trumpet collection boxes. Mark 12:41. Jesus sat down opposite the place where the offerings were put, and watched the crowd putting their money into the temple treasury. Many rich people threw in large amounts. So we've got some rich folks who are clinking their donations off the side of the trumpet collection boxes. Verse 42. But a poor widow came and put in 2 very small copper coins, worth only a few cents. It's a thought that counts, right? It's just a tiny little bit of change, but it's a thought that counts. I mean, nobody's going to be doing much or getting rich off of this lady's donation, but that's not how Jesus sees it. Calling his disciples to him, Jesus said, I tell you, this poor widow has put more into the treasury than all others. They all gave out of their wealth, but she, out of her poverty, put in everything that she had to live on. You see, to Jesus, it wasn't about the amount that was put in. It was about the percentages. And I told you at the beginning that math was important. You didn't believe me, but see, Jesus says it is. Yeah, let's say that rich people put in $10,000 in the trumpet. And what they had in the bank was $100,000. Well, that'd be nice. $100,000 in the bank, that'd be nice. I'm happy when there's 1,000. I'm happy when there's 100. Okay, so what's the math on that? They put 10,000 in, they've got 100,000 in the bank. 10%. Did you get that in your head? Did you have to pull out a calculator real quick? Yeah, so these rich people gave 10%. The poor widow, on the other hand, puts a couple cents into the bank, into the box, and in the bank, she had a couple cents. So what percentage did she give? Let's say she had 2 pennies and she put 2 pennies in. That's 100%. You know, that's impressive too, that you're able to do that math in your head. I really hope you didn't have to pull out a calculator for that one. Yes, so what Jesus is trying to get us to understand, what he's telling his disciples and what he's sharing with us, is that as church members, we would be looking and oohing and eyeing over how much was put in a plate by a rich person. I mean, I'm not going to lie. It'd be pretty nice if somebody dropped $10,000 into the plate. You know what I mean? Yeah, that'd be pretty awesome. But as church members, we probably wouldn't be oohing and eyeing over a couple of pennies. But what Jesus is saying is God sees the percentages. He doesn't just see the amount. He sees the heart of the giver. That's what God is looking for. And he's looking at where that giving is originating from, where it's coming from. That's what matters to him. And it's pretty awesome when you get to see the heart of a giver. I've seen it before. It's beautiful. And I personally think that one of the easiest places for me to see it is through the giving of a child. And I don't want you to think about the wrong way. I'm not talking about giving a child to someone. Look what I got you for Christmas. It's a newborn. Yeah. I'm sending it back to the store. I can tell you that right now. I am too old for diapers. And by too old for diapers, I mean I am too old to change someone's diapers and still a little bit too young for my own diaper. It's coming now. Anyway, I'm talking about when a kid gives what they have. That's pretty awesome to see. If you've ever had the privilege of watching a child give from their heart, you can definitely appreciate where Jesus is coming from. I've watched my kids, I've watched kids from the church give like this widow. I've witnessed times with no leaning from their parents that they have given of their very own money to Sunday school, to help kids get surgeries, to animal shelters, to the homeless, to those battling sickness, to organizations that were collecting money that tugged at their heartstrings. I have watched them at times give virtually everything they had with no concern for no longer having it. I've watched them run and get their purses and their wallets and grab a $20 bill, which for a kid is a good bit of money. And when I see them pull that big amount of money out, sometimes something inside of me, this little voice says, don't let them give that much. A dollar or two would be more than enough. But to stop them would be to choose to miss the beauty of what I was seeing. It's not very often that you get to watch someone give 100%. And you know that our Father in heaven is grinning ear to ear because of their loving generosity. This is childlike faith, a faith that is willing to give it all. When you're talking about percentages and giving in the Bible, I don't know if this is the first thing that comes to your mind, but the first thing that comes to my mind is tithing. Maybe this is a word that you've heard before. If it is, and I say tithing, what percentage comes to your mind? For me, it's 10%. The percentage of 10 is something that shows up a handful of times in the Bible. That's where we get it from. It comes from the Old Testament. The very first time that this number of 10% is mentioned is in Genesis 14. See, Abram returns after having defeated 4 armies in a battle, and a priest explains that he was victorious because God was on his side and blessed him during this battle. Genesis 14:18. Then Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. He was a priest of God Most High, and he blessed Abraham, saying, Blessed be Abraham by God Most High, creator of heaven and earth, and praise be to God Most High, who delivered your enemies into your hand. Then Abram gave him a tenth of everything. This tenth of everything is carried through the Bible as a tithe that is given to the Levites or the priests in payment for their services to God. Because of this, some Christians make it a point to give 10% to God, as if to say thank you and honor this tradition. Trinity, our church as a whole, even takes 10% off of what we take in, and then we use it and give it right back out to bless individuals or organizations in need. We call it our monthly tithe. I find tithing to be a useful tool to help make sure that you are showing God your gratitude for what you have been given. Did you know that the Levite tithe, however, was not the only one that was recorded in the Bible? Yeah, there was a Levitical tithe, but there was also a tithe of the feasts and a tithe for the poor. Now, if you calculated all of these tithes, the bare minimum would put you at a 23% tithe for the year, if not more. It's quite a bit, isn't it? Now, remember that we are not under the law. You are not required to give a certain amount of money to God. But tithing numbers, percentages, are there to help you realize that it is important for you to give a portion to God, whether that be money or yourself. And the easiest way to see it, if you're doing it properly, is to see the percentages. There's a lot of information that can be found in percentages. That's why God sees the percentages. If you want to know how good you did on a test, you look at the percentage. If you want to know how much your phone battery is charged, you check the percentage. If you want to invest your money before you do so, you look at the percentages. There's a lot of info that can be found in the percentages. And as a Christian, I'm hesitant to break our Christianity down into percentages because that can easily lead to legalism, which has in so many different churches. But I tell you what, Percentages really are a useful tool to help us take a look at ourselves, an honest look at ourselves that we can't lie through. Because calculating percentages is just a tool that is used to help us more clearly see and understand our own hearts. The widow, she did not have much, but she gave 100%. What are your percentages? What do your numbers have to say about you? And I think the best place to begin to calculate these percentages are to look and think about how you spend your time. Let me break this down for you. If you sleep 8 hours a day, then there are 16 hours of being awake. This means that 16 times 60 minutes equals 960 minutes that you're awake during the day. You're awake 16 hours or 960 minutes. If you spend 2 hours or 120 minutes of your day watching TV, you divide the 120 by 960 and you get 0.125. Move that decimal place 2 places over and now you have found your percentage. Do you get that math? This is why math is important, folks. So if you watch 2 hours of TV, that means 12.5% of your day is spent watching television. Well, it sure doesn't feel like that much when I'm doing it, but it sure looks a lot bigger on paper, doesn't it? Then what do our percentages of time that we spend with God look like? If you do a 5-minute devotion in the morning, then 0.5% of your day is spent doing a devotion. If you spend 10 minutes in prayer, then 1% of your day is spent praying. If you spend 20 minutes reading your Bible, then 2.1% of your day is spent praying. You get that? Let me ask you this. If you were to calculate your numbers, would they be enough? What would your percentages look like? If you rank your percentages in order, how do the things that you do with God and for God rank up against how much time you spend scrolling on your phone, playing a video game, reading a book, mowing grass, making dinner, going to work, going to school, playing or practicing a sport? And remember, folks, a lot of these things that we do, that we have high percentages on, they're not mutually exclusive. God can be incorporated into them. We just many times choose not to because he gets his own percentages. You know, if you want to see where your heart is, all you got to do is check the percentages. And if you don't like what your percentages say, then do something about it. Find ways to incorporate God into what you are doing, or clear some time to make sure that he gets his due. What is his due? Well, that's a conversation for you and him to have. But I'm guessing that it's more than he's currently getting. You agree? Put it down on paper. Tell me what the percentages say. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Take care. God bless. Hope to see you soon.